when you're thinking through a data lens, you can help generate revenue through insights, and you can help save money through automation. And both of those can be done relatively inexpensively.
Chad Peterman here, and you are listening to Can't Stop the Growth, a platform for leaders and teams to grow and thrive. We highlight the importance of personal development, pursuing greatness, and always chasing your potential. Let's get into it. I have a very special guest, and one that I think you listeners will find extremely intriguing, mainly due to what he's doing here at Peterman Brothers to help us make smarter decisions and to use really data as the main driver of how we make decisions within the business. So, without any further ado, we'd like to welcome Mike Zuidema, our business intelligence developer here at Peterman Brothers. Welcome to the podcast, Mike.
Thanks, Chad.
Excited to have you here. Why don't we give the listeners, I imagine most of them in the trades are probably wondering, where did we stumble upon a business intelligence developer? So give a little bit of your background and then maybe a little bit of insight into what you do on a daily basis.
As for my background, I actually did not work in the home services industry, believe it or not. I came from mostly different areas of research, medical industry, pharmaceuticals, things like that, doing same thing, mostly data and analytics. Got my degree from Grand Valley State University in biostatistics a couple years back. And then my wife and I moved to Bloomington area where she's going to IU doing her PhD there, and was looking around for jobs, interviewed with this company, and really liked what I heard in the interview process. So ultimately took this job and been really enjoying it. In that interview process, I always try to figure out, what is this job? Like, why are you hiring for it? And it kind of came out in the interview that this company is growing pretty quickly, very quickly actually, and we were ready to make the leap into really getting serious about data and analytics and using that to help make decisions around the company. So yeah, been here for about 15 or 16 months now. A lot of what I've been doing is helping set up sort of the data infrastructure around here. So helping us basically access the data more easily. And especially as we continue to grow, that gets to be more of a daunting task if that isn't as automated as it could be. So that's a large bulk of what I do. And then always looking for little quick wins if we can work in some automation to help save people time, or some ad hoc reporting. Questions are constantly coming up with different projects, so answering those along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a lot to unpack there. What I'll do here initially is kind of, most listeners, if you're in the home service industry, there's a bunch of things you probably heard in there that you can probably relate to. If you're a Service Titan user like we are, understanding the reporting, and I'm sure everybody's run the same report or what they thought was the same report twice, and only to get different results. And so what Mike really helps us do is to really understand that data, make sure that we're all looking at the same thing. Mike, why don't you talk a little bit about when you've presented this data to managers, as far as from your reporting, what's kind of the overwhelming response once they see that it's been all compiled, they know how it was compiled, different things like that, as opposed to them getting frustrated or something like that with Service Titan? Not that it's not a great software, it's just knowing where to go is sometimes the hardest part.
Yeah, so first of all, I think people are generally relieved that they don't have to go and do that themselves. I mean, you hit it right on the head that it's a pretty complicated process to, get the right data and be sure that it's the right data. When you're working solely in Service Titan and you're relying on your operations software to provide your reporting for you, the logic is a little bit of a black box where you kind of have an idea of what report you're looking for, maybe, but, we're pulling in different fields and different metrics, and it's hard to be sure how those are calculated a lot of the times. And that's just kind of how it sits in the software. That's before any business logic is applied to it or anything like that. So yeah, I think the response is generally a good one because there's more confidence behind the reporting. But also, like you said, I think it's really important to have, we call it like the source of truth around here. I think at maybe certain companies, reporting kind of lives within, individual departments. So you'll probably have different people that are responsible for answering these kind of questions, and you'll have a person in sewer and you'll have a person in HVAC service. And if you ask one question, you might get 10 different answers from 10 different people. So what we've been trying to do here is kind of centralize that data repository, bring in somebody that is up to date on our current KPIs and what they mean and really all the intricacies with those, and then someone that can basically just deliver those answers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've heard the same thing from a lot of our management team, especially as we've scaled. You get more hands in actually completing a job and what do those metrics look like and different stuff like that. I would tell the listeners that if you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm in no place to bring on someone of Mike's caliber, you may be right. But what I would tell you is that, before we had really smart people like him and the people on his team, we started with a whiteboard. We started with a whiteboard in a hallway, and we would go up there every day at around 9 o'clock, and we would report the data that we had pulled out yesterday to see if we won or lost. And I can tell you that was a huge game changer, both from an accountability perspective and then also from a just knowing your numbers and knowing, hey, this number's been red for 3 days straight. What are we going to do to change it? As opposed to just continuing to go along without referencing that data. Either in this industry or in your previous work, why is data so important when running a business?
Well, I think the premise of using data to back decision making is, well, I guess just that. Without it, a lot of times stakeholders will have a hunch as to what the problem is. Sometimes there's a narrative behind it where we think things are playing out in a certain way. But without data, there's really no way to be sure. And with it, we can look at a lot of what we do here is like pricing or what we think things are the situation to be versus actuals and see how those compare.
Yeah, one of the areas that we've done a lot of work is within our price book and determining if you ask 5 plumbers, they'll all tell you different times that it takes to put in a water heater. Through looking at data, we're able to actually tell the actual time that it takes our crew to put in a water heater and then price accordingly. And I think one of the most common things said throughout this industry is making sure that you're priced right. If you're never priced right, you're going to struggle in the rest of the business and you're going to keep beating your head up against a wall because you don't have the proper data to make the proper decision within the business. And that's why I think it's so important. We've invested heavily in our data analytics and understanding where things are and how do we improve them. In your experience here in compiling the data, what's the one thing that surprised you the most when compiling all this data, getting into a new industry, understanding it? What were some of those one or a couple things that really surprised you and have been things that like you understand better now, but it was like, whoa, what's going on there?
For me personally, coming from a very different background, most of the time previously I was not working with businesses, so profit really just wasn't on the radar. We had different interests and different success metrics. So just learning how a business runs was new for me. And I found that really interesting, and that was a lot of fun for me to learn. I'm still learning, especially with the launch of our inventory system. A lot of things changed with that. So that's always fun to keep up with. The other thing I noticed was, well, we did something pretty special, and it's hopefully only going to happen one time in a business's life cycle, and that's set up a robust data infrastructure. We essentially went from just, like you said, Service Titan reporting, maybe some departmental Excel sheets where people are doing some calculations. We went from that all the way to a fully equipped and automated data infrastructure. And basically what that does is it allows us all automated to pull the data out of Service Titan, pull the data from any sort of other disparate data sources that we have, like our accounting softwares, or maybe vendor pricing sheets, or any kind of Excel sheet lurking out there. Pull that, do some transformations along the way if we need to, put it into a data warehouse where we can have a lot more flexibility with what we do with the data and a lot more sort of vision into what's going on with the data, a lot easier to do QA checks on. And from there, we can hook in a visualization tool to it to take the data, turn it into tables, graphs, basically insights to help make decisions.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things there that I want to draw attention to. Technology in this industry, as well as every industry, is going to keep your business on the cutting edge. So he talked a number of times about automations and visualization tools and different stuff like that, all helping us make better decisions. And if you think about all of the things that we run into on a daily basis. Everybody's went to the shoe website and looked at a pair of shoes, and all of a sudden they ran the data and start serving you ads on different platforms and stuff like that. Data is all around us. Sometimes it can be scary knowing what they know, but essentially they're just looking at data. They've just gotten really good at it. Mike, what kind of future projects, what do you see moving into the future of how data can help our company kind of navigate the industry?
So I'll say that, first of all, setting up that infrastructure was a long and it'll continue to be an ongoing process. There's always new tables that we'll need to pull in, business logic will change. So there's that. But I think something for the future is, right now we mainly do what I would call reporting. And in my specialty, that there's a difference between reporting and analytics. And I think we could really start moving into analytics. So I think our industry is interesting in the sense that we are pretty weather dependent or weather driven. If you're talking about flight lines, weather is something that's going to lose you a lot of money potentially. So it's something to keep an eye on. In our industry, it's something that could make us a lot of money because people's ACs are going to go out, maybe their basement flooded. There's room to do some predictive analytics in that regard, just with something as simple as weather. We can do predictive analytics with budgeting, just different types of forecasting in different departments. Yeah, the sky's kind of the limit on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen that firsthand. A lot of the things that we do today, I would have, trust me, I would have never imagined that could be done outside of plugging numbers manually into a spreadsheet and running a sum formula, because that's about the extent of my Excel knowledge here. One of the things that I want to talk about, we talk about data, how it can drive the business forward, how it can continue to allow you to make better decisions. Mike is also in our Leadership Academy. And so that may sound funny, like Leadership Academy and the data guy. Well, what's going on here? And what I want to do is talk a little bit about why you decided to get into the Leadership Academy and also what you've gotten out of it so far.
I initially sent that email to Alyssa Bass to begin the academy, just kind of looking for change, I think.
Yeah.
I found that growth and really kind of putting my head to the grindstone is something that makes me happy in life. I'm not someone who can just sit back and coast. That's just gets very boring very quickly for me. So yeah, I just kind of took it on as a sort of challenge to myself. And I guess the reason I'm here today is because I'm nearing the end of it, about to complete level 4 out of 5 levels. And I really wanted to do something that was just way out of my comfort zone. And I kind of looked through everything and said, yep, that's it. That's about as radically, as uncomfortable as I could think, especially compared to the other pieces that I've done previously, which were good and had really good lessons involved in them, but weren't nearly as uncomfortable as doing something like this.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Mike said, one of the challenges within the Leadership Academy is to do something outside of your comfort zone. And so he chose being on a podcast. And so that's why we sit here today, but also providing a ton of value based on what he does and give a little bit of background on our Leadership Academy and what we're trying to do with that. The biggest piece, we started that probably 2019, I believe, is when we started that, and is a way for anybody in the company outside of work hours to, for the most part, work on themselves. We want to hopefully build better people, ultimately building a better business. And I commend you on taking up the challenge and growing yourself. I think the other thing that is interesting is how data allows us to grow so that when those leadership skills are needed, you're ready to go. And we've got a bunch of people that are ready to go when we decide we need another one. And well, someone's got to lead the charge, but we're going to have to kind of help that person that we bring on to help you. We're going to have to lead them. And so I think that's a really great thing that you're doing and hoping to move yourself forward and different things like that. I guess from the Leadership Academy, what's been the most enjoyable thing that you've done thus far?
So the levels are broken into sort of themes, I'd say, and kind of the biggest thing I'd say that came out of it so far was level 1 was focused on wellness, which is interesting to think about because it's almost like I think I had this preconceived notion that that's something that's outside of the workplace. It maybe doesn't relate. But after going through it and thinking about it more, I think it is totally relevant to how you perform in your job. If things are out of whack at home or your health is bad, you're probably not going to be able to perform in a work environment. That's a much less serious thing. So one of the tasks in the wellness section was to just try out a new hobby. And the thing that I decided to try, well, I had previously been really into exercising and weightlifting and kind of like lost my fire for that a little bit. So I decided to try something new and take up rock climbing. And so I went a few times, and now I think I've gone probably 4 to 5 days a week on average over the past 8 months. Ended up losing 30 pounds in doing so, and I think about a month and a half ago, I got certified as a lead climber, which what that means is you're basically the lead person who sets the route and sets the protection for the route. So you're climbing above your last piece of protection, clipping in, and it's a little bit more advanced than just starting out. So ended up falling in love with that and took it pretty far.
Yeah, I'd say so. That's an interesting thing. I've never thought about it. I did it like a couple times as like a kid. Definitely sounds like an exciting like way to work out as opposed to just running on a treadmill or lifting some weights or something. Well, good for you, man. That's fantastic. I don't know that I'll be joining you on the rock face anytime soon, but that'd be fun to have a company event there. And I think that you pointed out I think a key piece of the Leadership Academy, and that is to really try to touch on all points of a person. You may think that, oh, I just got to be really good at work and I can let my diet, my exercise fall off or what have you. And there again, we're all going to fall off sometimes. I mean, hell, I've been there to where, you got to kind of get back on the horse, make sure you're drinking your water, watch what you eat. Life's busy and it's easy to make some bad choices, or not bad choices, but, just you could have made better choices. We'll just say that. But no, that's fantastic. And I think this Leadership Academy, for you to say that that's one of the results, even though that has nothing to do with what you do on a daily basis, to me, that's extremely impactful because when you're in a better place, you probably churn out better work or whatever that looks like, or, better at home or whatever that looks like. So I think that's awesome. One of the things I want you to touch on, because we've worked on a couple of projects together, which has been a lot of fun, and I've learned a lot from that. What do you think is, from a leadership perspective, and I'm kind of dialing in on the characteristics of a good leader, what would you say you've learned from the Academy, and what would you say are those characteristics from a leadership perspective that you think are extremely important?
Something I remember from actually a recent podcast of yours was, I think it was the interview with you, Indy, was what was one of your regrets in starting and running the company? And the regret was basically not trusting people or not getting out of the way sooner, giving people the trust and federation to do their job and the trust in them that they're going to do a good job and make decisions that are in the best interest of the company. I'm much more of a hands-on kind of guy, so although I've had, limited experience managing people, I think that's a lesson that I've learned is that you should basically give someone the tools to succeed. Don't do it for them.
Absolutely. So you being on the podcast today presents a perfect example. If we didn't value trust around here, Mike probably wouldn't be here, to be perfectly honest, because if our team didn't trust that he knew what he was doing and could do a really good job at it, I don't know how to do what he does. I've watched him do it, but I would not have the first clue on where to start or how to be really good at that. And to me, he mentioned his background. He comes from outside the industry, had no experience whatsoever. And one of the common themes within the home services industry is bring people from the outside of the industry in to gain a new perspective. And the only way to do that is you have to trust, because you've got to trust that, which we do, that, Mike is extremely talented. He understands what he does. He knows what he's doing. And yeah, there's things along the way. A lot of the projects we've worked on has been him doing his thing and me just providing a little color as to like how the business operates. Well, I'm not telling him how to do it. I may just be answering some of his questions that he may not know the answer to. Well, okay, that's the two of us teaming together to churn out some product. And I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, that is probably one of my bigger regrets, is just not getting out of the way sooner. And that's natural. It's not like it's a bad thing. It's just, in order for the company to keep scaling, you've got to trust. Like, trust has to come in there at some point in time if you're going to continue to move the company forward, because you yourself can only have so many hours in the day and can only make so many decisions, that if you don't let others make decisions, maybe fall and stumble here and there, you're never going to be able to build a really, really good team. And fortunate for me and fortunate for our team, we try to run trust through this entire organization, because we're constantly bringing people on that have never been in this industry. So we've got to trust that all of their intangible skills will mesh really well with the technical skills if they're out in the field, or mesh with the day-to-day stuff that you've got to do. So I think that's a great point. As we wrap up here on the podcast, and really appreciate you kind of stepping out of your comfort zone and making this happen, I think that you've provided a lot of color as it relates to data, as it relates to kind of leadership and kind of how we view it here. If you were talking to another home services company, and they're a smaller company, their next hire is probably not you, where would you suggest they start when it comes to collecting data?
Well, there's a couple steps to that. I definitely don't think the first step is to do what we did and, stand up an entire data infrastructure. That's a massive undertaking. That's going to require multiple people, many hours. But I think there's a lot of quick wins to be had along the way. So when you're thinking through a data lens, there's two things you really want to think about. You can help generate revenue through insights, and you can help save money through automation. And both of those can be done relatively inexpensively. You don't need the newest and biggest tech tool out there to do these types of things. There's a lot of free resources, although we've kind of moved away from Excel for the most part. An Excel file is one of the best tools you can have in your toolkit. There's a lot of free data viz tools that can just hook up directly to that are also free. Like Google has a great data visualization tool that's completely free to use. So you can still do a lot of these things for relatively cheap. And I guess if you are at the point where you want to take on a person to fulfill that data role, I think that's a good investment if you can front the money for that, because it is really important to have a unified understanding of your data, what it means, and your different KPIs.
I think those are both great points. The only other point that I would make, you probably didn't bring it up because it's a source of a lot of your headaches when it comes to compiling the data, is if you are smaller and you're looking to kind of wrap your arms around data, one of the key pieces that I think you can focus on is process and procedure as it relates to inputting the data. So as a customer record comes in, having a unified process and procedure with your CSR team, with your dispatch team, so that when this happens, everybody in the organization puts this tag on it, or puts it in as this job type, or whatever the case may be, because the cleaner that data is going in, the easier it's going to be to compile coming out the back. Do you have any thoughts on as far as that? I know you've ran into some headaches along the way with how it's inputted. And not that anybody was doing anything wrong. It's just we didn't have a process to make sure that the data was clean.
No, you're 100% correct on that. And I can tell you've thought about this before and the company's thought about this before, because one thing I was surprised with coming in was our data, all things considered, is pretty clean. A lot of it, well, most of the operations data lives in ServiceTitan, so we can control a lot of the parameters to that. We can set things up so that we have a system to create clean data. And just like you said, your end user looking at a report means nothing if the data going into it is garbage. So yeah, that's one of the best things you can do. I haven't had to touch it too much, which is a good thing. There's been little tweaks and improvements along the way that we've just run into through conversations with various people on different projects. But yeah, that's something that may be a problem for other companies, and it's definitely worth taking a look at, and it's worth investing resources in, even though that is probably not the most fun or exciting process to redo existing processes and really clean things up. But we actually did it not too long ago when we revamped our price book. I think a big push behind that was to just kind of tidy up the data, essentially.
So again, if you're smaller out there and looking to get started, find those key metrics that are important and find out how you would start from the beginning and find out how they get inputted so that you could actually calculate it. You don't have to do everything, but find the ones that are actually going to drive the business. Things that come to mind right now are conversion rates or turnovers for new systems, different things like that you know are important, but you need to wrap your arms around and find out actually how that's being inputted into the system. If everybody's inputting a turnover differently, well, it's going to be awfully hard to pull that data to find out how many you actually had and where you can improve things. So a wealth of information there from Mike as it relates to data and what his specialty is. And we're also grateful for you taking the time to do this. I think that you've given the listeners a lot to think about and hopefully improve their business along the way, which will be really good. So listeners, data is your friend. I know it can sometimes be boring and looking at that, but it is truly the stuff that is going to make you able to drive your business forward efficiently. And so take some of the things that Mike shared today, implement them into your business. It's been a huge piece of what we've done for really the past 2 to 3 years. So it takes a while as well. Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to get connected, you can find me at chadmpeterman.com. To see what our team's up to, you can visit petermanbros.com. As always, keep growing out there.